But it's now time for my first nomination, and I'm going to nominate Jess Phillips, the Labour MP, Home Office Minister, right? A woman who spends her life telling us how she protects young women and girls, right? She reads out every year, it used to be a party ballot, it's an important issue, blah, 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 blah. But this week, right, the reason she's made it onto Plank of the Week is that this week she was the one that the government chose to stand up in the House of Commons with literally 40 minutes left.
Big questions are being raised in UK politics. Why did the government quietly drop the grooming gang inquiry? Jess Phillips, once vocal on women's issues, is now silent, protecting her image. Critics call her a hypocrite. PM Keir Starmer faces backlash too. Why spend millions on racism tests while ignoring real problems? Is this about justice or politics? Well, to know all about this, you have to stay tuned till the end. Jess Phillips, a Labour MP who recently became a Home Office minister, is facing serious criticism after a big government decision shocked many across the country. This all came to light during an episode of Plank of the Week with Mike Graham on April 11, 2025. The show, known for calling out political missteps, didn't hold back. They chose Phillips as their Plank of the Week after she announced that the government would no longer be going ahead with a promised national inquiry into grooming gangs. What made this worse? The announcement was made just before Parliament went on Easter break, when many weren't paying attention. Victims and their supporters were left stunned and angry. For years, Jess Phillips has been known for standing up for women. One of her well-known acts is reading out the names of women killed by their partners every year in Parliament. Many respected her for this. But now, people are asking, where is that same energy when it comes to girls who were hurt and ignored for years in grooming cases? On Mike Graham's show, the question hit hard. Graham himself said that while her reading of names might seem powerful, it's starting to feel like she cares more about the performance than the actual people behind the names. So what exactly did Phillips say that sparked this outrage? On the day Parliament closed for Easter, she got up and said that the government had changed its mind. There would be no national inquiry after all. Instead, she said smaller, local investigations would take place. She claimed that she had received advice to make this change, but refused to say where that advice came from. That only made people more suspicious. Mike Graham and his guests were angry. They felt the victims, many of whom had waited years to be heard, were being ignored again. Graham said clearly, "Who gave her this advice? Because I doubt it was the people who were harmed by these gangs." One of the strongest responses came from a new Conservative MP, Katie Lamb. She spoke up in Parliament and didn't mince her words. She brought attention to the background of the victims and the people who harmed them. She pointed out that most of the girls were white and most of the men involved were from Muslim communities, often of Pakistani background. She quoted a victim from Guisborough and made it clear that the crimes had a racial and a religious angle that should not be ignored. Lamb asked Phillips to speak openly about this uncomfortable truth, but Phillips did not directly respond. On the show, Jeremy Kyle, another panelist, was visibly angry. He said if Jess Phillips really cared about the victims, she should have refused to be part of the decision and maybe even quit her job over it. He believed that the decision wasn't about justice, but about politics. That Labour was scared of upsetting voters in areas with large Muslim populations. Chloe Dobbs, another guest on the show, also criticized Phillips harshly. She called her a hypocrite and claimed that Phillips only just managed to hold onto her Birmingham seat in the last election, mainly because of voter anger over Labour's stance on Gaza. According to Dobbs, this latest move was Phillips trying to protect her position, not the victims. The conversation got even more serious when they talked about how deep this issue really goes. Graham said that some girls are still struggling to recover, both physically and emotionally. Kyle added something even more shocking, that some high-ranking police officers are now being accused not only of ignoring these crimes, but possibly being involved. That made people feel even more betrayed. The panel agreed. By stopping the national inquiry, the government sent a message that these victims don't matter. The latest episode of Plank of the Week took a sharp look at the political decisions being made behind closed doors, and what came out of it left a lot of people deeply worried. The panel spent a good chunk of time focusing on why the Labour government, led by Prime Minister Keir Starmer, chose not to move forward with a national investigation into the grooming gang cases. Instead, they decided that local councils would handle things. But the big question raised on the show was, why back down now, and who really benefits from this choice? Chloe Dobbs, one of the panelists, said it had everything to do with votes. She pointed out that in most areas of the UK where the Muslim population is more than double the national average, Labour holds the seat. That includes Jess Phillips' own constituency. With council elections coming up, Dobbs suggested that Labour was worried any national focus on the ethnic background of the suspects might hurt their support in those areas. They're scared, she said, not just the MPs but also local leaders. Mike Graham didn't buy that this was a good reason to stop a national inquiry. Why would it upset law-abiding Muslim communities to say we want justice for these girls, he asked. Graham and Dobbs agreed that most people would support catching the criminals no matter what background they come from. Jeremy Kyle joined in and said that, in fact, leaders in those communities should be helping identify those responsible. He said similar efforts have worked before when dealing with other issues like radicalization. The panel also pointed out a pattern. Where Labour isn't in charge, investigations seem to be moving ahead. Dobbs mentioned Oldham as an example. But in places where Labour controls the council, there's a lot of pushback and delay. They're doing everything they can to avoid being investigated themselves, she said. Graham added that the fear of community backlash just didn't match the facts. He reminded everyone that even after convictions in grooming gang cases, there hasn't been some huge spike in hate towards Muslims. So, why use that fear to shut down a national effort? Keir Starmer didn't escape criticism either. The timing of the announcement, made late in the parliamentary session right before Easter, was called sneaky. Jeremy Kyle said it looked like the government tried to slip it through when no one was paying attention. If they believed this was the right thing, they would have been open about it, he said. But the panel didn't stop there. They also spoke about how Starmer handled a recent meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump and current Vice President J.D. Vance. Starmer had said that free speech in Britain was still strong. Graham disagreed, saying, "Every week we hear about someone being shut down just for saying something unpopular." He said Vance was right to challenge Starmer's statement. Then came another topic that left the panel shaking their heads. Parliament reportedly spent £60,000 of public money hiring undercover people to test if Westminster security guards were being racist. The idea was that these people, sort of like mystery shoppers, would walk around and take note of whether security staff asked to check ID cards more often from people of color. A previous report claimed this was happening and labeled it a form of microaggression. Graham said that this was a waste of time and money. They're treating staff like villains before even proving anything, he said. Instead of spending thousands investigating guards just for doing their jobs, he argued that money could have gone towards something more important, like helping victims or improving public services. The rest of the panel agreed, calling the whole project ridiculous and insulting to the people trying to keep Parliament safe. Things got heated on Plank of the Week when the panel talked about how taxpayer money is being spent. They were furious over £60,000 being used to secretly check if security staff in Westminster were being unfair to people based on race. Graham was clearly annoyed, sarcastically asking if the guards were now being spied on just for doing their job. He even joked about Black Rod, a well-known ceremonial role in Parliament, saying he's probably in trouble too, just to show how ridiculous it all sounded. Kyle didn't hold back either. He compared the money spent on this project to the case of Lucy Connell, a young woman who ended up in prison. He believes she was wrongly treated and that this kind of spending showed how badly priorities are being handled. "We're throwing money at fake problems while real people are suffering," he said. Dobbs added that this whole thing felt like ticking boxes rather than doing anything useful. Graham nodded in agreement, saying that after all the spending, the results would likely just prove nothing was wrong to begin with. Then they moved on to another issue that had the panel shaking their heads. A quiz by Westminster Council that staff had to take to see how privileged they are. The quiz gave people points based on things like skin color, gender, and even whether their parents read to them as kids. Kyle explained, if you're a white male and your parents read to you, that's bad according to this quiz. Graham called the whole thing mad and said it was wasting time and energy while bigger problems like violence and healthcare were being ignored. Kyle also talked about meeting a young couple in the Army. They told him that military families are being kicked out of their housing to make space for incoming migrants. The panel found that deeply troubling. They felt it showed just how disconnected the government was from regular people who serve the country and expect basic fairness. Immigration came up again when Candace Holdsworth shared a shocking case involving a man from Jamaica who had committed serious crimes in the UK. He wasn't deported because officials thought he'd be treated too harshly back home. The panel was stunned. Graham said it made no sense that someone who'd already hurt others here would be allowed to stay because jail in another country might be tough on him. Candace also mentioned other troubling cases like a man from Syria who avoided punishment because he said he had trauma from prison in his own country. Another man from Nigeria said he was possessed by an evil spirit to try to avoid being sent back. The panel felt these excuses were being taken way too seriously and that the public was being put at risk because of lenient decisions by courts and lawyers. They were also upset about a £500 million deal with France to stop small boats crossing the channel. Graham showed a clip of the security gate that was supposed to stop people. It stayed open all day and only closed at night. He and Kyle joked that it was like giving free entry into Europe every morning. Kyle even said they must think we're fools, blaming the French for not taking the deal seriously and just taking the money. But the biggest concern running through the show was that politicians don't seem to be listening. Graham said that things have changed. People weren't allowed to talk openly about immigration 10 years ago, but now they're demanding answers. He thanked alternative media for giving people a voice and called out the BBC and others for staying quiet just to avoid upsetting certain groups. He ended by saying that if the government keeps ignoring real concerns, the country could face even more serious problems. So, what are your views on this? Do let us know in the comments section below. And for more such amazing videos, please do subscribe to our channel.